Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Hello, Renegade Thinkers. So here's the situation. You're the CMO of a startup. You got to build pretty much the marketing engine from the ground up. You find your positioning. You get your demand gen engine running. Life is pretty good. And then you acquire a new company. Okay, that's going to change a lot of things, but you're a CMO. You can react. You can deal with this thing. No big deal. And then there's another acquisition. And suddenly, life might change a lot more than you expected. And that is exactly the situation that my guest today went through, and she's going to share it with us, and it's going to have some really interesting implications for you as you think about the marketing, even without an acquisition. So Isabelle Papoulias is the CMO of Mediafly. It's a Chicago-based sales enablement company. And as I said, she's lived through this experience. So welcome to the show.
Hi, Drew. Very excited to be on your podcast. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you. And for those, I always share this kind of stuff. This is the second take because, of course, in the first take, I butchered her name, but that's cool. It's all part of being a podcaster. So let's go back to, you arrive at Mediafly. I know you started in sales, but you become the head of marketing. Mm-hmm. And this is before the acquisition. Just talk a little bit about the challenge that you faced and in that moment.
Right. So really the challenge was I needed to build a marketing engine from the ground up. The company had not had consistent marketing efforts. And it was reliant more on the sales engine. So when I took over, there were a couple of people on a very nascent marketing team. And really my job was essentially just build it from the ground up, hire a team, develop the strategy, put in place a tech stack, develop messaging and sales collateral very quickly because, there was a baseline of sales support that needed to happen.
So let me stop you there for a second because that's a long list and I want to break some of those things down because you're basically building a marketing organization from scratch. And I know this happens a lot and I've seen it happen a lot. And some people really like that. Some CMOs really like to do that. Now, knowing your background, you hadn't really gone through this before. Mm-hmm. So, right? I mean, your background, you spent a lot of time in advertising. When you came to the company, you started in sales. How did you even know where to start?
So, wow, that's a great question. I've never really thought about it that way. I think that even though I came from an agency background, I had a lot of changes within my agency career that were deliberate, that I chose. And so I found myself even before Mediafly in roles where I was building either a team from scratch, and perhaps it was a US team, but then we're going global, or I was injecting account management practices within a media team. So the notion of you need to build a 90-day plan and you need to build an annual plan and start rolling things out was not something I was unfamiliar with. And in fact, it's something I love doing.
Right. And it's funny, I have to go way back to an early episode of Renegade Thinkers Unite. There's a woman on the show by the name of Gina McDuffie. And she, my nickname for her and for her is she's Gina the Builder. That's what she does. That's what her sort of personal brand is. So she goes in, she spends 3 years, she builds the structure, and then typically she moves on, which I think is really interesting. So knowing that you had that strength certainly then makes it easier to take the job on because you kind of know how to build something from scratch. So let's just talk about the order of things. You mentioned hire a team. That was priority number one. Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you were hiring this team was there any sort of characteristic or cultural match that you were trying to sort of get to? Because these days, so much of it's not just do they have the skill set, but are they the right person for the company?
Right. I mean, we have a very defined culture at Mediafly and company values. So that's an important filter for us as far as the type of person we're looking for. Also, look, we're a startup in a high growth phase, right? So you need the person that's going to come in and is not looking for a well-oiled machine and consistency every day. That is just not what you're going to be doing here.
Right. They've got to be able to just sort of go with it and recognize this is the way startups work. And that really is hard. And it's a very different person. It's funny. I had lunch with a CMO friend today, and we had the same conversation as, the hire for the $10 million startup is different than the 50 versus the 100 versus the billion. I mean, they're just very different entities in the cultures and expectations. Okay. I'm really interested at this point. So you got the team. You built the tech stack. What was the hardest challenge of those things during this phase for you?
That was 2 years ago. The hardest thing was actually the noise around me, which I think is noise that any marketing lead experiences. There's a lot of opinions in the room. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room wants to win. And because marketing was a new discipline for Mediafly, there were very strong opinions. So staying true to, it's a difference between consensus and collaboration. I'll collaborate with you, but at the same time, I have to remember that you put me in this role because I'm the marketing expert, and ultimately I have to make the call and I have to trust my judgment as an expert. And sort of, so making sure you don't get sucked into that noise or influenced too much is not always easy. I'll admit that.
Right, and it's really tricky because you are in a business. So I think I know exactly what you're talking about, which is everybody watches the Super Bowl, so therefore everybody thinks they're an expert on advertising. And to me, it's sort of the equivalent of, everybody writes out checks and maybe some people balance their checkbook, so therefore they're a CFO, right? It's just ridiculous, but nonetheless, nobody seems, and even this happens in the C-suite, nobody seems to have a problem to make a comment about what the CMO is doing.
Right.
And provide advice.
Right. So it's again, finding that balance between, look, there's a lot of smart folks and they have great ideas, but knowing when that's the right idea versus your idea.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of different, we've had a lot of conversations on the show about approaches to this, because the downside, the problem, the reason why the CMO can't simply ignore everything that all these folks is you have too many dependencies,
exactly.
Right? You need the CFO to give you the budget and believe in and agree on the metrics. You need the HR people to help get the message out internally. You need this, obviously you need sales to buy into whatever you're doing. And you even need product to bake in the marketing message. So you can't operate in an island no matter, even if you wanted to. So it's a very dicey situation. Okay. So there was a lot of noise. You had to ignore some, pick and choose, build some collaboration. Okay. What was the sort of, when you sort of right before the acquisition of the company, where did you feel like you were? I mean, did you feel like I got this, things are moving along pretty well?
So I felt that was at the end of the sort of the first year of launching marketing, as I call it, right? So the first year was marketing foundation, right? Building and stabilizing. And we had done that. And I felt like, okay, I have a 3-year plan in my head. The first year is lay the foundation. The second year is improve based on what you learn in year 1. And the third year is aim even higher and go for best in class. So at the end of year 1, going into year 2, I felt pretty good, and I felt like, okay, we're going to start year 2 and think we'll have a good plan because we're learning quite a few things in year 1, and let's go do this.
Okay, and then the acquisition happened. So what changed?
So, well, what changed is, first of all, you have to, it's disruptive, right? Because all of a sudden, it's almost like you have to stop some of the priorities you're currently working on, and an acquisition just sucks in a lot of resources. So you have to almost pause everything and focus on this acquisition that is happening very, very quickly. That's the simplest way I can describe it, really.
Yeah, and so I'm guessing that you're dealing with things like, okay, you've acquired the company. How do you integrate them? Do they say keep a separate brand and a separate thing? Do you have common marketing? Do you have common sales? There's so many.
Exactly. There's a lot of to-dos, and so
Right.
you have to build all the what I call the roadmaps. Is okay. So you're in charge of merging the websites, and you're in charge of merging the tech stacks, and you're in charge of merging the content, and you're in charge of merging the sales process, and it's daunting, it's time consuming, but it works really well, and we did it very well in the first acquisition. When you plan in advance and you have clear leaders. I'm a firm believer in you can only have one leader per project, one owner, one true owner.
Right.
With firm deadlines and a clear project plan, and it actually worked. I will say it worked very, very well in that first acquisition. In fact,
how long did that take?
It was fast.
So how many?
From the day we acquired, right, to when we were pretty well merged, was 3 to 4 months.
Okay, that's impressive. And so within 3 or 4 months, you've made all the decisions, you've consolidated everything, everything's back up and running, if you will, as one thing. All right, we're going to take a break and we're going to disrupt that whole situation. Stay with us. Hey, it's Drew, and I wanted to have a quick conversation about turning lemons into lemonade. Here are the lemons. Skiing, Park City, January 11th, third day, last run, going fast. Light was bad, a lot of snow on the ground. 50 yards from the bottom, I crashed and burned. Literally tumbling down the mountain, did a 3-point landing with my head and 2 thumbs. Broke the right thumb, sprained the left thumb, finished up surgery 5 days later. And now I have a little extra time on my hands. What do? I finish a special report that I've been dying to finish for a long time, which is a way for me to get to my next book. It's a preview of the book. You can find it on renegade.com. On the very beginning of the homepage at the top, there's a banner that says B2B Special Report. I would love it if you took a look at this and let me know what you thought. I think you're going to find a lot of value in it. Okay, we're back. And so we've been talking about, dealing with an acquisition and integrating a new company into it. And we didn't even talk about the cultural issues that come with an integration, but let's just assume all that went well. So you're 4 months in, things are running pretty well. How much time between then and the next acquisition? About
6 months or so. So we had 2 acquisitions within the same year.
Right. Okay. So we're going to fast forward. So in that 6 months, most of that time was you just spent dealing with it. All right. So then, boom, acquisition number 2. And when I remember in our prep call now, when we talked, what was interesting is when you first approached this, you approached it pretty much the same way. And let's just talk, right? And then we're going to do the same process. So talk a little bit about that. What you did there with the second acquisition. So
again, we came out of this first acquisition, patting ourselves on the back and going back to your question about timing, we merged, we in 3 to 4 months, aren't we amazing how organized we were? And so we thought, great. So we have the playbook. We did it well the first time. It went really well. And we'll do the same this next go around. So had a similar launch plan in terms of announcement and everything you'd expect to go without a press release, website, et cetera. And then we had a similar roadmaps for post announcement. And we were, again, pretty ahead of ourselves as far as getting all of that planned and ahead of schedule. And we're feeling very good.
Right. You're feeling really good because this is like suddenly a skill set you didn't know you had. Now you have it. You've done it. It worked. Apply it again. Why wouldn't you? Right. And so at what point did you sort of scratch your heads, and what was the moment where you thought, and talk about that scenario where you say, maybe we're not doing this right?
So, the moment, and I still remember it vividly, was a conversation with our CEO. And that's when I realized that this acquisition had the potential to be a lot more transformative for us than the last one. And, he said something to me. He said, I want a campaign. and I said, well, what does that mean? We didn't do what last time. Say more. And so it's when I started to ask more questions and trying to get into his head, and then we started having this exchange that we both realized that is, we need to make bigger news out of these. There's a storytelling opportunity that wasn't necessary for the previous acquisition, and an opportunity to disrupt the category and elevate our brand positioning as a result.
And I want to pause you for a moment, because there was a moment there in that conversation, and the CMOs who are listening have had that conversation where they may or may not have pushed back. They may or may not have said, what do you mean by campaign? Because I think you're a CMO, you know what a campaign is, but you really were. And that's a moment of real sort of backbone. I got to tell you, it's a moment of backbone. It's a moment of courage, because at that point you're saying, the question that you're asking doesn't quite feel right, but I'm not going to say that because you're the CEO. I'm just going to be a little Socratic here, and I'm going to sort of get deeper into this thing so that perhaps, and because it sounds like in your mind you already knew, you were thinking maybe this was different.
So in fairness, I actually was not.
Oh,
so
okay.
You're giving me a little too much credit, but I'll take it. The question really came, although that's still great advice, and I've learned from this, right? So for the next one, whenever that is, the question really came more from, I actually don't really understand what you're saying. Uh-huh. So say more.
Right. Okay.
Actually, I knew there was something there.
Right.
And it felt like he was coming to me with the solution without giving me the reason behind it. And that's really what I was trying to get at.
Right. Yeah. Don't give me a tactic. Let's talk strategy. Yeah. And again, great question, because the conversation between the CMO and the CEO, when it stays on the strategic level, it can be really powerful. When it's on the tactical level, it's one of those, hey, we need social media. That is not valuable input to the CEOs listening to a CMO. No, what is it that we need? Oh, well, we need more employee engagement. We need more customer engagement. We mean, okay, why do we need that? And well, so, you get to, oh, okay, well, maybe then tactically we can solve that problem. All right. So not to beat that, but just the mere fact that you asked the question. And by the way, the fact that your CEO was thinking differently makes sense and was sort of challenging it. And one of the things that I really like on this, and that we emphasize so much on the show and in the writing, is that repositioning a company has to be more than a coat of paint. It's not about a campaign. It's about something substantive. And it sounds like, as you were looking at this acquisition and he was looking at the acquisition, he was realizing, there's more to the story. So what was it that was more to the story? What was this evolution or even really significant, sort of almost revolution in terms of the company going from here to there?
Right. So really the biggest thing for us was, we were known, the perception of Mediafly historically has been we are our sales enablement platform that is more premium and really for enterprise. And hyper customizable for the needs of very sophisticated organizations that are truly looking to transform the way they sell digitally. And with this acquisition, we were adding essentially to a portfolio and expanding our total addressable market so that we were now able to service the needs of all the sales enablement needs of all companies, regardless of size.
Okay, so that's a huge
medium and
change.
small, right? And regardless of their level of sales, what we call sales enablement maturity, where they were in the sales enablement journey, were they having very basic entry-level needs, or had they already been doing it for a while? They're already using tools and they are looking to become a lot more sophisticated. So we thought about it really as we have this opportunity to essentially bring sales enablement to the masses and democratize it in a way.
That's such, and so this is really an important threshold for a company, because selling to an enterprise, you know what the playbook is. You've got to build an enterprise sales force. You know it's going to be a longer sales cycle, so you have to have all sorts of things that go along with it. When you're selling direct to small businesses in the software as service model, the whole support structure is different. The model iteration is different. And so that's a huge consideration. And it affects staff, it affects culture, it affects marketing.
Mm-hmm.
How did you all sort of get to the point where you realized this is a smart way to go?
Well, it was conversations obviously within the leadership team, and then honing in even more so on one of the main barriers to acquisitions that we see is there's this notion that sales enablement is an expensive and risky and complex proposition, right? We often bump against that barrier.
Right. Through
this acquisition, we were now able to combat that and say, well, actually, no, because we're making it easy and not costly, and we have a self-serve option now, and you can just go on the website and swipe your credit card, and it's not a big risky commitment, and you can actually sign up with us and be up and running quickly and build a business case to then expand and become even more sophisticated. That was truly the turning point. Is like, hold on, like this is the pain point, and we're now able to go after this.
And for clarity's sake, the reason you could suddenly do this was one of the acquisitions that you made had something in there.
Yes, and the second one.
It's interesting. I was having a conversation with a CMO about this recently, not on the show, but sort of in just conversation. And we talked about, there's always the grass is greener syndrome, right? You're an enterprise. I wish we had lots of customers, or you have lots of customers and you wish you had enterprise. And it's just funny. It's just the way it is, right? And it's very hard for marketers to stay focused on a target. But having said that, the appeal of what you're talking about is, and you've seen that with Red Hat, you've seen it with MongoDB, you've seen it with Magento, these companies that can offer a free or freemium version get a massive pipeline of users. I think Megan Eisenberg, when she was on the show, was the CMO of MongoDB, and I think she said they were getting 45,000 downloads a day of their, cloud-based data product. And 45,000 a day. I mean, you probably would, if you had those numbers, your marketing challenge would be very different, right? You probably wouldn't have time, because we'd have to be just spending every second just figuring out, okay, of those 45,000, who can we convert into paid, right? So, all right, I digressed. I apologize. So once you decided that you were going to go this broader market, where did how did the brand story change? In terms of how did you articulate it? How do you bring that story to market?
Yeah. So we took it on as a campaign. So we didn't jump in right away and say, we're going to truly change our brand positioning or anything like that. It was more, let's make sure we launch beyond your typical announcement tactics. Okay, we need a press release and we need a blog and we need to brief the analysts and so on, right? How do we make this more memorable, more iconic, and add, make sure it has emotional resonance? That was the biggest difference between the second one and the original acquisition. So it was really developing a campaign, an integrated campaign. We called this Sales Enablement for All campaign, and a series of ads and long form, short form content, obviously information on our website, paid social, and we made sure that the presence we had at trade shows reflected that branding and that campaign. And then we followed that immediately after. So that was the launch was around the CEFA, what we call the CEFA, Sales Enablement for All message. But then immediately after, we followed that through with essentially a freemium offer, which we call the 100 times 3 offer, 100 users for 100 days for $100.
Oh, there you go.
To show, because it was important for us to not just talk the talk, but to walk the walk.
Right.
So we're saying we're bringing Sales Enablement for All. We're actually going to show you that we're really committed to doing that.
Interesting. Well, the good news is your CEO finally got his campaign.
He did, and he liked it.
Well, that's good. All right. So as you think about the campaign, was there anything about it that you went, that worked better or worse than I expected?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, the offer, the 100 times 3 offer, it worked very well, but not in the way that we had expected. So we had this moment of, if we build it, they will come, and they actually didn't come.
Uh-oh.
We anticipated it would be a demand gen tactic, and we had on our website, and we see it in other ways, and that we would get flooded with leads. Haha. That didn't actually happen, but what did happen and is happening still is it's become a great hook for our sales team to use very strategically as they're engaging prospects when they're finding it's really helping them to convert that prospect, right? It's been much more impactful that way, and we've had great conversions that way, but it's not what we had initially expected.
Oh, that's interesting. So you go out there thinking you're doing a mass sale, and it ends up that this is really just a sales enablement tool for your enterprise customers. Because really what you're allowing them to do is pilot now in a way that they couldn't before.
Right, but not the enterprise customers. Companies that are small, or medium sized, that know they need sales enablement, but don't have the budgets or can't build a business case internally to try it. So this was not an enterprise play.
Right. Okay.
To say, okay, now I can do this, and I can essentially do a POC and prove to my superiors that this is working to build a business case. So it's still very much an SMB play.
Oh, okay. So you had salespeople who were actually calling on SMBs then. I see. Okay. And this is the way. Right. Okay. That makes sense. And what I'm really hearing is the concept of sales enablement as a software tool is too young to sort of people to go and buy it without the sort of helping hand of a salesperson. And that's really interesting. Yeah. And so, all right.
And 93% of companies, I believe that CSO Insights, are still not enabled, don't have sales enablement technology, right? So that's, that's a huge white space.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. I'm back. I'm not going to talk about skiing, but I do want to talk about the special report that you will find on renegade.com. There is so much meat in this, in the 12 steps to a more effective B2B brand strategy in 2020, that there are probably some folks out there that think I'm crazy to put that out there in front of a firewall. But I'm really hoping to get feedback from some of you all on the report, perhaps what's missing, because again, the book is going to be developed against this outline, but fleshing it out. There might be some guests that could help fill in some of the areas. You may disagree with some of the things. I'm really, really interested in your opinion on this piece, and your engagement with it will really help make the book that much stronger. So you'll find it on renegade.com. Very top, there's a banner that says 12 steps to a more effective B2B brand strategy. Take a look. Okay, we're back, and let's see, we've gone through 2 acquisitions, we've relaunched the brand, we've developed and we've radically expanded into the target audience. We've sort of had some surprising results in that you didn't quite get, it wasn't like people sort of signed up and started downloading, but your salespeople were able to sell against it. And what's so funny about that is you're a salesman enablement company, and essentially your product became sales enablement. In other words, that your marketing of this and this offer enabled your salespeople to get pilots going. So,
yeah. and to be clear, that was not, the offer was sort of like the one tactic that ended up working differently than we had expected. But we did see huge jumps in lead generation and pipeline generation as a result of the messaging. the rest of the campaign and other content related to the campaign that we had out there. So it's just that the offer was surprising as to how it ended up working for us.
Right. So I did a quick Google search of sales enablement companies. There seem to be a lot of brands out there. And when I hear like the percentage of penetration of 7%, you're all having to sell the category, which is so hard because you have to sell the category and you have to sell yourself. How have you sort of been able to sort of walk that fine line, right? Because you're doing so much educational work while you're also saying, hey, you still want them to buy your product.
Right. So so there's the education that needs to happen, right? And you're sort of evangelizing to the masses, so to speak. But what we're also doing very successfully is targeting companies that we know are hand raisers, have proved in-market signals, through account-based marketing technology. They're past the education, past the awareness and exploration phase. They're further down the buying cycle and their customer journey, and so we're also focusing on them. And of course, the messaging is different. Can you give any sense of what those signals might be? And is it they're coming to the website, or is it behavior? What are like, for example, if you're a branding agency, you know that mergers is a moment. That's the trigger moment where people are going to be. What would be an equivalent in your category? So again, through the ABM technology platform that we use, we actually see the behavior online. We see what keywords they're searching for. So not at the individual level, obviously, but the sort of the account level, the company level, and then the websites they're visiting, and of course, for those that we know, we also see what they're looking at on our website. But it's once we understand that they're searching for sales enablement content or information, then they're more likely to want to talk to us. Right, because you don't have to sell the category to them. Exactly. Because they're already they're the 8 and 9 and 10%, and those people are ready to do it. Okay, so they're exposing their interests. And that's been I will say that it's been revolutionary for marketing for our team. Revolutionary. Okay. Yeah. And so let's say that they've identified themselves. So what because ABM, I've had several folks who actually work at ABM companies, from Demandbase and Engagio, and it means different things to different people. With that information, you then do what via ABM? So with that information, what we do is, first of all, we focus on our ideal customer profile, and then we create segments, right? So looking at our ideal customer profile, and also for us at industries, and then based on what we know they're looking for, we will target our messaging using that same language. So we will develop, display campaigns. We'll serve them ads. We will, serve them. We'll do email campaigns, and so on. But really the big difference here is that we're able to target the messaging very specifically to what we know they're looking for. So it's much more personalized and customized. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Based on the information that you have. And it's funny, and I'm glad I asked the question, because that is an aspect of ABM. And then there, all sorts of, when I had John Miller on the show from Engagio, ABM really for him is a lot of high impact direct mail to a very specific high value target, right? And I think it's a little bit different here, because this is your value per customer potentially, I guess, could be high, but it's not necessarily initially, right? And so this is when you're dealing with small, medium-sized business, the more you can automate this and get these folks right all the way to the finish. Right, you scale it. And by the way, we've tried the sort of premium direct mail approach too. It didn't work for us. Something we might consider redoing in the future. I think it was just our execution wasn't great. Yeah, I mean, and just for the folks listening, having done this a fair amount, and it's sort of a classic formula, but
you got to have the right list, and you got to check it twice and three times and make sure that person, and it's really got to be a good list. And if you're doing this high impact, number two, and then you have to have a really profound and interesting and disruptive offer. And by that, I mean, it's not, hey, it's not your 3 for 1. It's, you get an autographed baseball in a baseball case, and there's 2 others, right? That there's places. And so if that you're assuming that aligns with your message, and then you take a meeting and you get a second signed one that fits in the case, right? Assuming you're talking to a baseball person.
And
so
one other thing, Drew, about ABM is, sort of like the definition is it's beyond marketing, right? So for us, it's also the buzzword of sales marketing alignment. So the business development team is also targeting those same lists, those same prospects, right? So we're very much working on this together. So those prospects it's a surround sound approach. They're hearing from through different channels.
You know what? That's the first time anybody has ever said surround sound approach on this show. So bing, 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 bing. Yay, I love it.
Bing, bing.
Yeah, that's it. It's like the magic word. Thank you, Groucho. So I'm curious, we've talked a lot about, as a CMO, you've been able to deal with a fair amount of organizational change, marketing change, strategic change. What do you think for your fellow CMOs are probably the biggest lessons learned for you from this experience?
So there's a few, really. The first one is, check your biases. Don't assume that the way you handled it last time is the way that you should be handled next time. I learned this the hard way, because when we made that pivot, when we had that moment, or hold on, this is different, I should mention this was 2 weeks before the announcement.
Oh, right. Yes, that's a lot more drama suddenly going back into the story that we had earlier. 2 weeks before the announcement, you pivoted. That's
exactly.
Amazing. Oh my God. At one point your heart must have just stopped.
Oh, absolutely. I can't even, that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. Okay. But everybody who's listening and has followed along at this point going, wait, 2 weeks before the launch of announcement, you and the CEO decide we're going to take the company in a completely different direction. Yeah. Yikes. Okay. So I would imagine a second lesson might have been practice meditation and breathe very heavily.
Yes.
But talk to me about what else do you have? So check your biases is a great one. Anything else, a big lesson learned?
Yeah, and then so check your biases, not just in terms of do it differently, but maybe next time, but also don't make assumptions about the brand architecture, that just because you're acquiring a new company, you should become I know you use the language of a branded house versus a house of brands. And so there's that piece, right? The other big learning for me was ask the right questions. Try to truly get in the head of your CEO. You think you might know, but you actually may not really know.
Right. And
they might think they're doing a great job communicating to you what's on their mind, and they might not be. And so that's, in hindsight, I wish I had done that better, right? So take the time, ask the questions, and then also have empathy. Realize that it's everyone within the company, including at the leadership level, is moving very fast. Acquisitions typically happen very fast, and maybe we haven't quite thought this through on an individual level as much as we think we have. So just ask the questions, take the time to breathe, pause, and of course, the CEO is the most important person to have these conversations with.
Well, yeah. You behind every successful CMO is a CEO that they've figured out how to really work with and help realize his or her vision, which is just it's impossible for a CMO to do well without a CEO and being aligned with them. So I love this, and for those who are listening as we wrap up this episode, I do want you to know that the marketing that Isabelle has done has been remarkably effective. And we didn't talk about that much, but we just sort of took it for granted because I just wanted you to share, to sort of imagine you were in this situation as we started the show with, and how would you deal with it? And it's in an earlier episode with Dob Barron, his recommendation to any CMO was stay curious. And, while I love that language. It's so much, if you just say, ask good questions for the moment, and at critical times, at really critical times. And it's one of the things I know about every CMO that I talk to is you're so busy, which is why I'm so grateful you listen to these shows, but you're so busy. And so there's that moment where you asked yourself, did I ask the right questions? And it's one of those things, I think it takes practice, right?
I like that. You're absolutely right. Because, I'll know better next time.
Right. You'll know better.
I practiced it this first time and I'll know,
right.
Yeah, it'll be better the next one.
And you know what? People say learn from your mistakes. I really don't. I'd rather learn from someone else's mistakes. So I'm really tired of learning from my own mistakes. I'm at this point, I should be a genius and I'm not. So I'd rather just, you all make those mistakes. So, all right. So we're going to take our big takeaway is as you're going through these things, ask great questions. All right. So my great question then for the audience is, one, what are your questions? What's that big question that you have for your CEO that's going to radically change the direction that you're going to take your organization in? I say that because I think CMOs have the opportunity to radically change the direction for a company. It may be positioning, it may be cultural, but if you set that bar very high and say, I want to make a significant difference in this organization because I am a chief in this organization, I'm going to do that first by asking great questions. Man, I love sharing time with you, Isabelle. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. It truly has.
And to you wonderful listeners, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. And until next time, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.